It's the Christmas shopping season in London, and rush hour is in full swing. Commuters and shoppers stream through King's Cross, the city's busiest underground station. Suddenly, a deadly wall of flame roars through the packed station. It kills 31 people. The world's oldest subway system suffers the deadliest fire in its history. Now, using advanced computer simulations, we reveal exactly what caused the tragedy. Disasters don't just happen. They're triggered by a chain of critical events. Unravel the clues and count down those final seconds from disaster. Europe, England, London. King's Cross Station, Britain's busiest rail hub. It connects above-ground trains from the north with the city's 260 miles of subway network, affectionately known to Londoners as the Tube. 5 tube lines serve 8 platforms at King's Cross. The deepest is 80 feet underground. 250,000 passengers surge through the station's labyrinth of passages every day. Wednesday, November 18th, 1987, 7:18 p.m. It's rush hour, and the city center is busy during the Christmas shopping season. For one man, the buzz and bustle of London is a new experience. Damon Brodie left his home in Scotland just 5 days ago to start a new computer programming job and a new life in the big city.
I always wanted to live in London. I mean, for somebody at 20 years old, it was a dream come true.
Brodie is eager to soak up London's sights. Tonight, he's off to see the famous Christmas lights on Regent Street, a trip that will take him on the Tube. But Londoners know that Christmas in the capital isn't all peace and goodwill. In 1983, the Irish Republican Army bombed Harrods department store. The blast 8 days before Christmas killed 6 people. Now, intelligence experts fear that the IRA may once again target London. But nobody knows where the terrorists might strike. "7:25 p.m. At King's Cross, 80 feet underground, passengers stream off tube trains and onto escalators, taking them to the ticket hall and the streets of London. On the Piccadilly line escalator, several commuters spot a man in a blue boiler suit descending into a nearby manhole. Workmen are a familiar sight on the wooden escalators of the dilapidated tube system. 2 minutes later, electronics engineer Philip Squire joins the escalator going up. He heads toward the street, obeying tube etiquette by standing on the right.
As I was standing there, I was just looking around as you do, and I happened to look down.
He sees something strange. A light beneath the wooden steps.
I could see this very bright glow, very intense.
When he reaches the top, he finds a London underground worker, and they look halfway down the escalator to where Squire saw the glow. But there's no sign of it.
I felt a bit silly because you couldn't see anything. So to be honest, I felt stupid.
Philip Squire goes on his way, embarrassed to have caused concern. "7:30 p.m. A couple minutes later, a man hits the emergency stop button on the Piccadilly line escalator. A British transport policeman on routine patrol investigates. He sees a small flame on one of the wooden steps. It's not a huge surprise. Fires are a fact of life on the aging infrastructure of the tube. There have been over 400 in the previous 3 decades. The policeman heads back to the ticket hall to call the London Fire Department on his radio. Down below, staff follows routine procedures, taping off the Piccadilly line escalator to divert passengers away from the tiny fire. 7:39. 9 minutes after the fire alert, police evacuate the station as a precaution. 2 miles away in the city's Soho district, firefighters respond to the call and head for King's Cross. Soho is the busiest fire station in London. Many of the men have fought hundreds of blazes. 7:43. Firefighters arrive in the King's Cross ticket hall. The ranking officer is Fire Chief Colin Townsley. Townsley has served 23 years in the London Fire Brigade. He dreams of retiring early and buying property in France. He's also a dedicated leader who commands respect and loyalty from his men. One of them is Robert Moulton, who has served with a man he calls the Governor for 4 years. Townsley and Moulton assess the state of the fire. The blaze is now about the size of a campfire, but neither man is worried.
We didn't think it was particularly bad. Didn't look much of a fire.
50 feet below, British Transport Police continued to clear hundreds of passengers from the station. One of the police officers is Richard Kukielka. After 5 years on the job, evacuation procedures are second nature.
It was just a matter of getting the people that were within the station out of the station.
Kukielka directs passengers onto the Victoria Line escalator, the only one still operating. It runs parallel to the Piccadilly Line escalator and emerges in the same place, the main ticket hall, just below street level. Heading up to the ticket hall with the throng is London newcomer Damon Brodie. He was on his way to see the Christmas lights, but his trip has been cut short.
Well, there was no panic, there was no rushing, there was no rush, it was just normal.
7:44 p.m. The fire has been burning on the wooden steps for almost 15 minutes, and the flames are now about 5 feet high. The blaze is 65 feet from police officer Kukielka at the bottom of the Victoria Line escalator. Fire Chief Colin Townsley is in the ticket hall. Sightseer Damon Brodie is traveling up the adjacent Victoria Line escalator. Brodie reaches the top of the escalator and steps into the ticket hall. Moments later, a huge fire erupts.
It was like an explosion happening in slow motion.
Damon Brodie takes a full hit. The flame ignites his legs and lower body.
My life sort of ended at that point.
In London's King's Cross station, a small blaze erupts into a ferocious inferno, spewing fire like a flamethrower and engulfing dozens of commuters. One of them is sightseer Damon Brodie.
I knew that particularly the back of me was on fire quite badly and around my legs area.
Thick black smoke pours out of the station exits into the street above. Firefighter Robert Moulton gets a hose ready to deal with what was, just minutes before, a tiny escalator fire.
There was a terrific roar. I heard this horrible scream that seemed to go on for ages.
The ticket hall was just full of people. Among them, his boss, Fire Chief Colin Townsley. News crews capture this scene as Moulton and his fellow firefighters grab oxygen sets and descend into the burning ticket hall to search for survivors.
Our only thought was just to try and fight our way down there, get to the fire and see if we could drag anyone out.
Caught in the inferno, Damon Brody rolls over and over, trying to put out the flames. Eventually, he succeeds. He's badly burned, and now he faces a new danger, dense, choking smoke.
It was absolutely red hot, and I could feel it burning my throat and lungs.
Moments after the fire erupted, from the bottom of the Victoria Line escalator, police officer Richard Kukielka sees a chilling sight.
When I looked up the escalators, all I could see was darkness.
When he sent passengers up the escalator, he unwittingly sent many of them straight into an inferno. But the blazing ticket hall is the only way out to the streets. Thinking fast, police and station staff flag down passing trains to get the stranded passengers out of danger. Meanwhile, firefighter Robert Moulton battles through the ticket hall, searching for survivors. His boss, Colin Townsley, is among them, but the fire is ferocious.
It was tremendously hot, searingly hot. You couldn't believe it.
Then, as he shines his flashlight through the smoke, he sees something. A white helmet. White helmets are only worn by fire chiefs.
Put my face mask right up against the helmet and shone me a torch on it, and I could see it was white, and I just knew it was Colin.
Townsley's not moving. And even if he is alive, Moulton knows his boss's lungs will be full of toxic smoke. He rushes to get him into open air. Deep underground, police officer Kukielka thinks he's gotten everyone out, but then he hears a shout. A colleague has found a passenger slumped at the bottom of the escalators.
His hair was burnt, and his head was burnt, and his hands were badly burnt. He was in a lot of pain. He was screaming and shouting, and he was in a lot of pain.
The man needs urgent medical attention, but he's too badly burned to evacuate by train. Kukielka fears they're trapped. Then he remembers that there is another way out. They drag the man to some iron gates leading to the exit. But when they reach them, they discover that someone has locked them.
Open the gates! Hello!
The only decision we could make then was to actually try and kick the iron gates down.
Hello?
Kukielka yanks frantically on the gates, but they won't budge. And he can't radio for help because his walkie-talkie doesn't work underground. Fumes from the raging fire above are starting to spread throughout the station.
Our eyes were hurting and our chests were hurting and we couldn't breathe properly.
Up in the blazing ticket hall, Moulton is dragging Chief Townsley out of the inferno. And just yards away, sightseer Damon Brody is fighting for his life. His lungs are screaming, and all he wants to do is sleep.
I thought, no, I'll just go to sleep now, and hopefully when I wake up, everything will be over.
Dozens of people in the blazing ticket hall are succumbing to deadly toxic fumes. And in the streets above, news crews capture this chilling scene. Firefighters staggering out, beaten back by the intense heat and flames. Any hope of saving the people trapped just 15 feet below is quickly disappearing. "7:52 p.m. Just 7 minutes ago, a fire engulfed London's King's Cross station, trapping commuters below ground. In the streets above the station, it's complete chaos. Firefighter Robert Moulton gives his boss, Colin Townsley, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to get oxygen into his lungs.
The very first time I blew breath into him, he sort of coughed. So I said, "This looks good," and we, really set to it.
Encouraged by the signs of life, Moulton doubles his efforts. Then paramedics rush his boss to the hospital. 50 feet underground, in one of the station's many passages, policeman Richard Kukielka is trying to get an injured passenger to safety before the fire reaches underground. But he's trapped behind a locked gate, and the gate won't budge. Then, a maintenance man appears on the other side, who has no clue that an inferno is raging above. But now he proves a lifesaver. He has a key to the exit. 32 minutes after the fire erupts, Kukielka rushes the wounded man out of the station to safety. Up in the blazing ticket hall, several yards from the escalator, the last of Damon Brody's strength is slipping away. Then, the 20-year-old is gripped by a sense of injustice.
I don't think this is right. I don't mind dying again in a week. I don't mind it happening in any other way, but I just don't want it to be here and now.
Summoning his last ounce of strength, he crawls blindly through the smoke, searching for some way out. The ground is fiercely hot, making it an agonizing crawl. Then, through the smoke, Brody sees a stairway. He struggles upward, inch by inch. Suddenly, a hand is reaching toward him. A stranger bends down and hauls Brody up the stairs, out of the nightmare and into safety.
When I got up to the top of the stairs, it was amazing.
At King's Cross, firefighters have controlled the blaze enough to venture below. But in the wrecked ticket hall, all they recover are dead bodies. Then, Robert Moulton and his fellow firefighters hear more terrible news. Their boss, Fire Chief Colin Townsley, has died at the hospital of smoke inhalation.
Obviously, we're all very shocked and sorry, and it was a bit numbing, really.
At 1:46 the next morning, the fire is finally contained. The inferno kills 31 people and seriously injures another 20. The tragedy horrifies the nation. Royalty and the British public come together in grief. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher visits the site and is shocked by the devastation. But the causes of the disaster are a complete mystery. More than 2 million people use London's tube system every day. If the Prime Minister shuts it down, London would grind to a halt. Thatcher sets up an inquiry to find answers. What triggered the blaze? And what transformed a minor fire into a deadly inferno in seconds? Now, by rewinding the events of that fateful day and by going deep into the investigation, we can reveal what really happened in the King's Cross Inferno. Advanced computer simulation will take us where no camera can, into the heart of the disaster zone. The government appoints an investigation team of 21 experts from 5 different agencies. Engineer David Shillito is one of the lead investigators. Shillito has been an expert in major fire disasters for more than 30 years. In the burned-out shell of King's Cross, Shillito looks for clues to the spread of the fire.
The burning patterns were fundamentally important. It was the shapes of the burning on the escalator, the way the smoke had blackened the underground structures. It was a sudden bursting forth of a major fire.
Within hours, police officers track down anyone who might have witnessed the blaze. They interview hundreds of people. Several describe how a jet of flame shot up the escalator and into the ticket hall like a flamethrower. The sheer explosive force of the inferno suggests a disturbing possibility. A terrorist attack. The IRA has bombed Londoners before. Is this the start of a new chapter in its terror campaign, targeting travelers on London's tube? The investigation team calls in David Halliday, a forensic scientist who specializes in suspicious blazes. In the sealed-off station, technicians examine the wreckage of the burned-out escalator for clues. Halfway down, they find the classic pattern of scorching that indicates the fire's origin point. It's underneath the escalator, close to the running track. But they can't find a bomb crater here or anywhere on the escalator. And the metalwork isn't shattered, a telltale sign of an explosion.
All of the steelwork and the structure of the escalator was in fact generally intact. Where it had distorted, it was clear that it had distorted because of heat, not an explosion.
The investigation team rules out a bomb as the origin of the King's Cross fire. But they're still suspicious. The speed of the fire spread could be explained by another criminal act, arson. A man in a blue boiler suit was spotted by 3 eyewitnesses. Could he be an arsonist, a former tube worker with a grudge? Now, Halliday is on the hunt for traces of an accelerant like gasoline, the calling card of an arsonist. They examine the area around the fire's origin point. But there's no hint of the odor that an accelerant invariably leaves. And Halliday can see that the fire started in an inaccessible spot.
It would be quite difficult to apply a flame while the escalator wheels were moving past the trackway.
The man in the blue boiler suit remains an unsolved mystery. It's clearly a case of mistaken identity. 2 days after the blaze, the investigation team declares the arson theory a dead end.
Investigators still don't know what caused the fire, but today they did rule out the possibility of arson. What no one can fully understand yet is the speed with which a small fire turned into an intense fireball.
If this was an accidental fire, it's even harder to explain how it suddenly turned into a freakish jet of flame. And investigators still have to establish how it started. With nothing else to go on, they probe the unburned area under the escalator for clues. Here, they make a disturbing find. The wooden skirting boards all along the 137-foot escalator are pocked with scorch marks. And not just one or two, 18 of them.
I concluded they were actually evidence of old fires on the escalator.
Something is triggering numerous small fires on the escalator, and one of them became the King's Cross blaze. There are dozens of wooden escalators on London's tube system. Until investigators trace the cause of the fires, it may only be a matter of time before Londoners face another deadly inferno. Forensic scientists investigating London Underground's deadliest fire have made a disturbing discovery. Evidence of 18 old, undetected fires under the escalator at the heart of the disaster. But they've also spotted something curious. Nearly all the scorch marks from these small fires are underneath the escalator's right-hand side. The rule of etiquette on the tube is that passengers walk up the left-hand side of the escalators and stand on the right. One thing that's easier to do while standing is lighting a cigarette. Could smokers' discarded matches be starting accidental fires under the escalator? Smoking's been banned on the tube for more than 2 years. So while it may be to blame in the old fires, can it really be the cause of the recent disaster? David Shillito and the team check with station staff and make a discovery.
People were smoking with impunity in the station. The smoking ban was totally ineffective.
The ban isn't strictly enforced. The prime suspect for the King's Cross fire is now a careless smoker discarding a lit match. But something made this fire take hold when all the others harmlessly burned out. Forensic scientist David Halliday believes the fire started close to the escalator's running track. But all its component parts are made of metal. There's nothing to fuel a fire. He examines an undamaged section of track and finds a thick coat of lubricating grease. Grease alone is hard to ignite. But when he examines it more closely, it's filled with discarded tickets, candy wrappers, fluff from clothing, human hair, and rat fur. It's clear that the running tracks haven't been properly cleaned since they were built at the start of World War II. Could 4 decades of garbage have created a flammable mixture? Back in the police forensic lab, Halliday tests the grease and garbage mix. He applies a naked flame to replicate the effect of a burning match. The dirty grease immediately catches fire. It seems that wooden escalators throughout London's tube network are at serious risk of catching fire. But igniting the dirty grease in a lab doesn't prove that a dropped match could start a fire in the real world. The only way to find out for sure is for David Shillito and the investigation team to recreate the chain of events at King's Cross Station. 51 days after the disaster, at 2 in the morning, the team gathers in the gutted Piccadilly Line escalator. This is actual footage of their experiment. London firefighters are on hand to contain any blaze. Then, on its undamaged lower half, one of the team drops a lighted match through the half-inch gap between step and sidewall.
3, 2, 1, now.
Investigators wait with bated breath. will the flame ignite the dirt-filled grease.
Caught some pluck. Yeah.
Incredibly, the very first match dropped ignites the grease and debris mix.
The first time we dropped a match, it actually started a fire. The very first match.
Travelling up on the track.
After only a couple of minutes, investigators can see the tiny glow through the gaps between the steps.
About a metre of flame.
In just under 7 minutes, flames start to lick up through the wooden steps.
It's coming through on the steps. It's now starting to come through on the steps. Do you want to stop this now? No, not yet.
The experiment is working. But Shillito and the team face a dangerous dilemma. They need to see how the fire behaves, but there's a risk the fire might suddenly roar out of control, just like it did in the disaster.
Are you getting unhappy about this yet?
After losing a colleague to the disaster, the firefighters are all too aware of the risks.
We're getting close to the time when we should withdraw.
High pressure reel down here, please. We're going to put the hose down now.
The fire grew, and it continued to grow, until, of course, the fire brigade told us to put it out.
Investigators are now convinced that the King's Cross fire was started by a discarded match that ignited dirt-clogged grease. But to prevent a repeat of the disaster, they still have to solve its most fundamental mystery. What transformed the small blaze into a raging inferno in a matter of seconds? Investigators are certain that a small amount of lubricating grease wouldn't be capable of creating such a freakish phenomenon because it burns too slowly. The hunt for the missing factor intensifies. Now investigators consider a theory being talked about in the news. It suggests that a phenomenon unique to underground stations could be to blame. When a train enters an underground platform, it pushes a rush of air ahead of it. It's called the piston effect, and it helps keep the tube system ventilated. Did a high-speed rush of air act like a set of giant bellows on the fire, triggering the flamethrower effect described by witnesses? Investigators examine station logs from the day of the disaster. They need to analyze the movements of trains in and out to build a pattern of air movements up the escalator shaft. In the 10 minutes before the inferno, trains departing underground platforms would have pulled fresh air down the escalator shaft, which wouldn't have had any major effect on the fire. But they discover that at 7:42, just 3 minutes before the fire erupts, everything changes. An eastbound Piccadilly line train pulls in. Seconds later, a westbound train also arrives. The combination of two trains arriving almost simultaneously has a dramatic impact on the airflow. It sends a huge blast of air up the escalator, the same direction the fire traveled. To find out if it offers the key to the disaster, investigators have to calculate if the airflow was traveling fast enough to have a significant effect on the fire. They measure the airflow produced by tube trains and calculate that two trains arriving one after the other would make the airflow up the escalator travel at 11 feet per second. That's only 7.3 miles per hour, nowhere near fast enough to trigger the jet of flame. A month of investigating, and David Shillito and his team still can't explain how a small escalator fire mutated into a rampaging killer. They've ruled out terrorism, arson, and the effects of airflow. An exhaustive search of the escalator shaft reveals nothing that might have acted as a superfuel on the blaze. The investigators are in desperate need of help. They turn to one of England's most famous seats of learning, Oxford, and the budding science of computer modeling. Dr. Ian Jones and Suzanne Simcox are pioneering the use of the world's fastest supercomputers to predict heat flow through buildings such as nuclear reactors. Investigators hope their software might reveal whether something about the configuration of the King's Cross fire zone could have triggered the inferno. Simcox creates a computer model of King's Cross Underground Station and then starts a small virtual fire. As it starts to spread, something strange happens. The fire lies down and clings to the surface of the escalator, instead of burning straight up towards the ceiling. It's so bizarre that Simcox fears she's made a mistake.
When we first showed some people, if they did ask if I'd got gravity up the right way, which is possible in a computer model, you set which direction gravity's in. We went and checked again and found that we had got gravity the right way up.
There was no mistake. The fire continues to lie low on the escalator steps. Then, within 30 seconds, it surges up the escalator at high speed. Just like the jet of fire eyewitnesses saw at King's Cross. But for the scientists, it doesn't add up. It's an impossible fire. All they can tell investigators is that it appears something about the physical configuration of the escalator drove the fire's behavior. There's only one way to prove what it was. They had to recreate the King's Cross fire for real. July 1988, 9 months after the disaster. 180 miles north of London, in the Derbyshire countryside, David Shillito and the team began an ambitious experiment. In a field rented from a local farmer, they build a model of the Piccadilly line escalator and ticket hall using all the same materials.
2, 1, go.
Then, a technician sets the escalator on fire in the exact same spot. The investigation team and computer scientists watch for the chance to finally discover what caused the King's Cross fire. "6 minutes in, and the blaze is behaving like a normal wood fire. Its flames are standing straight up. At this rate, it could take up to an hour for the test fire to reach the ticket hall. As the seconds tick by, it's beginning to look as though the computer model got it wrong. Investigators are once again staring defeat in the face. If the experiment proves a dead end, the mystery of the King's Cross Inferno may remain unsolved forever. Investigators trying to uncover the cause of London's King's Cross fire have built a wooden escalator and set it on fire. But the experiment isn't going well. The flames are standing upright and show no signs of turning into a killer inferno. Another dead end for investigators. Then, just minutes later, the fire changes dramatically. Rather than going straight up, the flames suddenly change direction. Now they lie down and start to cling to the wooden steps of the escalator, just like they did in the computer model. Temperature sensors reveal that the wooden steps directly above the fire are now incredibly hot. Within 20 seconds, investigators record temperatures of 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Seconds later, the flames erupt up the wooden escalator and burst into the model of the ticket hall. The scientists watch the flames in awe. Then they come to an extraordinary conclusion. Not one, but two phenomena combine to create the King's Cross Inferno. The 30-degree incline of the escalator makes the flames lie down on the steps. And the sides of the escalator contain the fire, creating a channel that concentrates the heat and flames and prevents them from escaping. As the fire spreads up the incline, it pushes an invisible blanket of heat and gases before it, which superheat a 65-foot stretch of wooden steps above. Seconds later, the superheated steps reach a critical temperature, around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and ignite. This creates the devastating jet of flame that surges up the escalator shaft. It's a phenomenon scientists have never witnessed before. The team names their discovery the trench effect. It's the final piece of the puzzle. Investigators now know the exact chain of events that triggered the King's Cross fire. What originally started the fire, what fueled its growth, and what triggered the giant jet of flame that engulfed the ticket hall and left 31 people seconds from disaster. Wednesday, November 18th, 1987. Toward the end of rush hour, a passenger riding up the Piccadilly line escalator drops a lit match. By chance, the match falls through a gap in the wooden steps and lands on the trash-clogged grease of the escalator running track. 7:29 p.m., 16 minutes to catastrophe. As the fire takes hold beneath the escalator, commuter Philip Squire sees the glow. He tells a ticket collector, but when they look from the top, the 30-degree angle hides it from view. 2 minutes to disaster. Firefighters arrive and assess the fire. It should be easy to contain. But what they can't see is that the trench effect is causing gases from the fire to superheat the wooden steps. 20 seconds to go. As passengers step into the ticket hall, the superheated stretch of escalator spontaneously ignites. Disaster strikes. Flames surge up the wooden steps, traveling at 40 feet per second. A jet of fire erupts into the ticket hall with a heat output of 25 megawatts, as much energy as a jumbo jet uses during takeoff. "31 people caught in the ticket hall inferno die from burns and inhalation of toxic smoke." 11 months after the disaster, the investigation team finally delivers its report. It concludes that the inferno's speed and scale was caused by the trench effect. It also ruled that all wooden escalators had to be replaced with metal within 9 months. London Underground started rigorously enforcing the smoking ban after the fire. It also trained its staff in the safest and quickest escape routes. Thanks to pioneering experimental work, fire teams around the world are now aware of the hazard posed by blazes on sloping surfaces. Their newfound knowledge will help save lives if such an inferno ever erupts again.